First and goal. Belton to the edge. Penn State has done it. A classic comeback, a thriller in 4 overtimes, and Devin Gardner can just sit back and watch as the white...
Welcome to the Straight from
Welcome
the
back
Crest
to the
podcast.
Straight from the Crest podcast. I'm your host, Michael David Kresovich. It's Michigan week. Packed show today as Garrett Bastardi joins the show as always as we discuss Penn State's upcoming showdown against the Wolverines this weekend. It's been a couple weeks here as we had a bye last week as Garrett was out in the zone exploring Arizona. Everyone needs a bye week, including the Nittany Lions. Michigan is off their bye week after their win over Purdue. Garrett, welcome to the show today. How we doing, my man?
Good, Mike. I'm ready for a big game this weekend and ready to talk some ball tonight.
Yeah, no game bigger. And I know we said this previously as Penn State played the Buckeyes a few weeks back, but now as the talk is going on, whatever's going on in Ann Arbor, Penn State has its back against the cliff, and they have no other option but to fight here. It's do or die time in Happy Valley, and fortunate for the Nittany Lions, they welcome in a very dangerous squad in the Michigan Wolverines. We're going to talk about kind of Penn State's performance against Maryland, some key takeaways there, what the Nittany Lions did to impress, and then we're going to break down the matchup at Penn State, what the Nittany Lions must do in order to get that victory. We're going to give our predictions. We'll just kind of preview that now. Not sure if you guys are going to really like our response, but as we said, this is not a Penn State football podcast. This is the Straight from the Crest. As always, we are brought to you by Protocol Beverage. Guys, go out and try it. Must be 21 to enjoy all over Pennsylvania and Maryland, really wherever. Just Google it on your phone. Great product. Shout out to the guys there in Erie doing their thing. It's been a couple weeks, Garrett. The last time that we talked was, I believe it would have been 2 weeks ago. The Indiana.
Yeah.
Indiana was the last game that we kind of broke down, which kind of gave us a little scare there. And then last weekend, just rolling over the Terrapins. And we can leave Indiana where that's at, but let's talk about the win over Maryland, because we saw a 4-touchdown performance from Drew, really the emergence of Mr. Dante Cephas, who we've been Team Cephas all year. We've been begging these second and third wideouts to kind of step up. Just a monster game for Cephas. Big game for Katron Allen, defense performance, 51-15 win there. How big is a win like that, Garrett, on the road against a respectable, a 5-0 team at one point? How big is that moving into Penn State's showdown this weekend? What does that do for a Penn State team that was not necessarily demoralized by the Buckeyes, but kind of had something to prove?
Coming off a game where they really almost let one loss turn into 2 losses. I think maybe a couple of years ago, Penn State loses that game to Indiana. And there was a time there for a bit late in the fourth where, I was tweeting out, get mentally prepared to lose to a 2-5 Indiana team. They were on the precipice right there. And fortunately, Drew and Keandre Lambert-Smith were able to make a play, and then the defense came up with a big stop to kind of get the game, into the W column. So the Maryland game was definitely a get-right game. Very workmanlike, very much like we've seen early in the season, like very similar to the game against West Virginia, similar to the game against Iowa, Northwestern as well. Maybe a little bit more dominant up at the line of scrimmage than maybe any of those games. And so it was something of a get right game. Maryland in the fourth really just kind of gave up. It's funny. Their head coach today, Mike Loxley, talked about how they didn't even watch the film for that game, for the Penn State game. Just post game, they're just like, we can't even look at this. They're a broken program right now, and for about the 5th year in a row, Penn State has broken them. So, yeah, obviously there's a little bit of concern to me in the Penn State secondary. I think this is a real. It's so interesting. We talked about early in the year kind of gap discipline issues with maybe a couple big runs here and there. we're not Penn State pod. We're a college football pod, just with our home team being Penn State. But the corners are turning out to be a little bit of a disappointment than what we were expecting and seeing, two potential top 15 picks, and Kalen King, being one of them. And he's been on the struggle bus, starting at the game of Ohio State. Then the secondary had two massive blown coverages against Indiana. And then last week, Taulia Tagovailoa starts 17 for 17. Basically, if the defensive line and the linebackers weren't getting to him, he was, throwing for 15, 20 yards a pop. That is a concern going into this week against Michigan. But, 51-15 is a great win. We celebrate wins around here, but, the back is against the cliff, as Mikey would say, and also our good friend Josh Pate would say. And so we are, we're at a point where it's kind of put up or shut up time with the 2023 season for Penn State.
Yeah, I think so. And I think kind of the anticipation of this game really revolves around a lot of things. I think there's a lot of talk about who's Michigan played, who's Penn State played. Historically, since 2017, Penn State's 3-3 against the Wolverines. They're 6-6 since Michigan, dating back to 2009. This isn't a team that Penn State historically fears. And in Happy Valley, Penn State holds its own here. Of course, last year, Penn State had the lead with 13 seconds left in the first half there, thanks to a couple of great defensive plays. And Michigan's run game kind of was able to set it apart from Penn State and pull away there. But I thought last year's game was a little closer than the final score indicated. That being said, which we'll get into later here, I think Michigan's team this year is a lot more talented than Penn State's team. And I think, on the contrary, Penn State's team has more talent than last year's team. I think we can talk about the losses in Joey Porter Jr., maybe the depth at wide receiver. But I think from a talent standpoint, from a developmental standpoint, Penn State's not really the same team they were last year. Garrett, outside of the Connor Stallion stuff, the Jim Harbaugh, when you see this Michigan team, what comes to mind? What's their identity? What should these people be looking out this weekend as they get ready for the big noon kick in State College?
Yeah, I think a lot of the casuals, regular everyday fans are going to say, Michigan's a team that's just going to want to line up and run the football. It hasn't necessarily been the case. They are efficient running the ball, but Blake Corum and company have not been, the same. So Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards haven't been the same real threat that they were last year. They're always a threat, but they haven't been as efficient. Kind of similar to what people expected with Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, just being two, almost like a Reggie Bush and Lendale White duo. They're not really. They're elite players. Both backfields are very good. But really, it's been J.J. McCarthy and his ability to kind of expand what he's been able to do as a quarterback, not just being effective, rolling out to his right, not just effective when moving the pocket, but being more of an overall threat, through the air and being efficient. All of this is really said with a caveat. They really just have not played anybody. I don't know who we can say they're tough. Maybe Rutgers is their toughest opponent so far, and Rutgers isn't a bad team. They're 6-3, and they gave Ohio State a run for the money last weekend, but they really haven't played anything close to what they're going to see this weekend. The same couldn't be said for Ohio State. They already played a pretty game Notre Dame team on the road. They've been tested. I can't say Michigan's been tested, but Michigan is very balanced offensively. They can beat you in multiple ways. They have a great line up front. They have, good receivers led by Roman Wilson, a name that we're pretty familiar with. He's been around the program for a while. And a couple stats that might be a little bit, surprising to some folks who listen, but in passing offense per attempt, from College Football Nerds, a pretty good site on stats. Michigan is top 5 in the country in passing offense per attempt. Now, passing offense per game, they're around 40 to 45th. But per attempt, pretty much an efficiency metric, they're top 5 in the country. On the other hand, Penn State's front seven has been very good. The defense is solid, but if they're lacking somewhere, it's in the secondary. It's on the backside of the defense. Penn State now all of a sudden is sub 40th in total passing efficiency on defense. That's a concern. It really is. The key to me, Mike, for this game, just coming out of the gates as what an early key. Can Penn State get Michigan off schedule on the early downs? Can the front seven, can Manny Diaz conjure up enough pressure to get J.J. McCarthy a little bit uncomfortable and put them into precarious situations that they haven't been in so far this year? It's very easy to be efficient when you are ahead of the sticks like they've been all year. They have had nobody give them any issue when they're trying to stay on schedule. And so can Penn State get Michigan off schedule, get J.J. McCarthy a little bit uncomfortable, maybe a little rattled in a tough environment. And then we'll see, what Michigan's really made of and how efficient they really are under those circumstances.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I do want to kind of touch on something that you brought up, which one of the major talking points heading into this game is who have the Wolverines played? But truthfully, I think they're kind of getting disrespected, Garrett. I think when we talked about earlier this year on the show, we talked about Georgia, and both me and you agreed that Georgia's the number one team in the country, not only because of the way they are playing this year, but what they're able to do last year to teams. Like, man, Michigan won 10 games last year by 21 or more points. They blew Ohio State out. They blew Penn State out. And they get back one of the best O-line in the country. They're the only team in college football history, Garrett, to win the Joe Moore Award, which is given out to the best offensive line in college football. They won it back-to-back years, and they get the majority of their guys back on the inside. They get some strength up front in Zach Zinter, Trevor Keegan, and Parson Barnhart's their third there. But it's a group, man. You mentioned Roman Wilson. They do lose a couple guys in Ronnie Bell, Luke Schoonmaker. But let's kind of talk about McCarthy, because you brought up a good point. Is with Michigan's philosophy, when Penn State was beating them, when they had Josh Gaddis, it was this kind of they like to work in space. It was a spread attack. Now it's kind of predicated on power run schemes, but it's not necessarily all circulated around the run. They like to move McCarthy out in space and give him the option, because he's a dual threat guy, and he used his wheels to kind of beat Penn State. So I think if they can figure out a way, man, to kind of contain McCarthy and limit what he's able to do outside of the pocket, I think that gives them a very good chance. But another name there is Cornelius Johnson, was the guy I couldn't think of. But it's a senior leadership team. I mean, they have something at the wide receiver position Penn State has. They have guys familiar with the experience. McCarthy's playing at a very high level right now. He's a very efficient quarterback. He kind of obviously separated himself from Cade McNamara. They were both kind of head and head a couple years ago, but obviously it's J.J. McCarthy's team now. He's drawing some pretty big recognition from NFL scouts right now. So it's really, really nothing. And their wide receivers are nothing like Marvin Harrison. Roman Wilson, he's had a great career, but he's not going to be a guy on Sundays that's going to be tortured. He fits into their system and what they do very, very well. I'll say that. And then just to continue the personnel fire, they bring back the majority of their defense. Wolverines bring back 9 of their top 12 tacklers from last year. So not only are they able to score points, they have one of the most dominating defensive fronts in the Big Ten. Junior Colson, linebacker, terrific guy. You'll hear his name a lot. And then Michael Barrett's another guy to kind of keep an eye out for. But I think this is Michigan's best team, even though last year they were very talented then. But to your point, when you talked about they have yet to be tested, so Michigan actually has 5 wins over teams with a winning record this season. Penn State has 4. And I know the quality there isn't what – I know that can be skewed based on opponent's opponent, but that's just something to keep an eye on. But let's kind of now transition into the keys to the game. You mentioned obviously on Penn State's defense being able to limit these guys. I think it's crucial that Penn State's is able to score points. I know that seems silly, but they have to have the big playability. They've got to limit turnovers, and they got to get after McCarthy somehow. What are your big keys to victory heading into the game, I should say?
Yeah, I mentioned how, I talked about obviously Penn State's secondary versus Michigan's passing game. I don't think that necessarily means that it's the secondary that needs to win the game for Penn State. I think it's the fact that, Penn State is by, far and away the number one, rushing defense efficiency team in the country, and just purely number one rushing defense in the country. And so it's and that goes to show, the strength of the front seven, the possibility of getting Chop Robinson back. This needs to be a game where we talk a lot about how offensive coordinators are able to kind of scheme up games and win games. If Penn State wins this game, it's because Manny Diaz, is ends up being worth his weight in gold, right? Just has a tremendous game plan, dialed up for this game. And so I think it's Penn State's front seven being able to stop the run, forcing Michigan to pass the ball and throw the ball, and then getting enough disruption and enough, pressure on important downs to get, Michigan, like I said, off schedule and a little bit more in the way of being inefficient. Another key I would have for this is, this goes without saying. Drew needs to play better than he did against Ohio State. He has the talent to win a game like this. Now, can he do it? I don't know. He is looking better. He made a big throw against Indiana to win the game, right after making a mistake. Last week, he made some big boy throws. Okay. He has the talent and the ability to go win this game. The season's on the line. This is it. You lose this game, all right, we go to the freaking Cotton Bowl for the, 5th year out of 7 years. Like, who cares, right? Lay it all out there. I want to see Yursich. I want to see Franklin. Let the kid let it rip. But he needs to, not take unnecessary risks. He needs to trust his arm. I think if he goes out and does that and has a big game, this could be the beginning. If they're, and I'm kind of rambling here, legends are made in spots like this, right? This could be that game. Hey, remember when Drew went off against Michigan and got Penn State to the Big Ten championship game? You remember that? That could be this type of game.
He has a chance to change the nation's perception on him. And he doesn't need to throw 4 touchdowns and 300 yards like he did a week ago. Penn State's defense is going to give him enough ample opportunity to kind of right his wrong. And we nitpick the guy every week. Coming into the year, expectations through the roof, and he delivered. And then we got to week 3, we're like, I'd like to see his down for accuracy increase. I'd like to see him hit the open guy. All he has to do is play exceptionally well and continue to turn the ball over, take some shots. If he throws for 2 touchdowns and 200 yards, Penn State probably wins this football game. If he throws 2 touchdowns in the air, that means Katron's getting in the end zone. It means Nick Singleton's going to score, because they've got Curtis Jacobs, Adisa Isaac, who made plays last year. Curtis Jacobs had a pick 6 that altered the momentum when it seemed like that. And then
Penn State
State's
led
offense,
this game last year in the second half. People forget that. Penn State led this game on the road in the Big House last year.
The Michigan momentum is a real thing. Penn State cannot afford to let these running backs run downhill, and their defense has got to get off the field. Just continue to do what it does. If Penn State plays a B- game at offense, I would think they would win this game. But if they perform as they did against Ohio State, they don't have a chance. They don't have a chance because this Michigan team can score. It's not like there's some stagnant bunch that relies on their defense and kind of just, we're going to milk the clock. Like, no, this team can score. JJ McCarthy's a baller. He's kind of evolved into this. I mean, he's a 5-star guy. Like I said, he's going to be in the NFL next year. He's a prolific guy. He is not a game manager. The dude can play some football. So let's kind of, obviously right there, you mentioned kind of the offense's ability and defense really stepping up on the cornerback position. I think if Penn State's able to limit the plays, continue to take care of the ball and take those shots, that gives them the best chance to win this game. And let's just move into kind of the prediction side of things here. How do you see this game playing Saturday?
Yeah, again, like kind of what I mentioned going into the Ohio State game was really I'm in, where am I going to put, like, when I make these picks, or when we make these picks, at least my mentality is like, what do I think is most likely to happen? Like, do I think Penn State can win the game? Like, I do. I see a route of them winning the game. With 12 minutes to go in the Ohio State game, really with 8 minutes to go in the Ohio State game, they still had a chance to win the game. But where would I put my money? Right. I would put it on Michigan. Penn State has not shown the ability to win these games with any sort of consistency. Okay, they have won. There's been a lot of talk. And again, not to mention Josh Pate again. We mentioned it a lot, but like, he did a really good segment on, like, James Franklin is not overrated. Right, he's actually very well rated. Okay. He does very well against the spread in these games. Penn State outperforms the spread a lot of times in these games, in these situations. It is hard to be at home or to be anywhere and be a 6-point dog against a top 2, top 3 team in the country and win. Okay. So this would be a program changing win for Penn State. This would kind of, yes, we've been 3-3 against Michigan in the last 6 years, 3-4 in the last 7 years, whatever it may be. The media as a whole tends to just forget what's gone on prior to 2022. The fact that Penn State beat Michigan in 2020, blew them out in 2019, blew them out in 2017. I get it. It doesn't really, matter, I guess, to them. This is a chance to kind of settle the score a little bit for Penn State. With that being said, I think I'd put my money on Michigan. I think Penn State can win the game, but I would probably go 24-17, 24-16 Michigan. I just don't have enough confidence that Penn State has the weapons on the outside again to kind of get this done. The lack of the explosive play, a really good stat is, Michigan's average touchdown given up right now is 44 yards. What does that say? That says that teams do not drive the field against these guys. Penn State is the king of going 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 plays, 77 yards and a touchdown. That's so hard to do against Michigan. Penn State's going to have to find an explosive play or two to win this game. I think maybe they find one, maybe, but to think that they can find multiple, it's going to be tough. I like Michigan, and I'd probably like them covering with a late touchdown.
Yeah, I'm with you on the side. I'll say that. It comes down. There's a role I always take into consideration is who's got more dudes. And I think if Penn State were to play the game out of their mind, to replicate Maryland, I would say last week on the offensive side, if the likes of Cephas and Lambert Smith show up, but I don't think they do. I think Michigan wins this game. I have it 28-24. I like the Nittany Lions to remain competitive here, but they are playing a top 3 team in the country. I think Penn State's probably 5th or 6th best team right now as it is. But I think it's a big running game for the Wolverines, and I think McCarthy is really going to be the difference maker here. And I hope we're both wrong. I hope Drew Allar really pulls the game out of his ass and just plays lights out. And I hope Penn State, we see a new identity established for the Nittany Lions offensively. But based on what we see, it's hard to say because they tricked us going into Ohio State where they're like, which I don't know where it came from, whether it was the media or just this misconception that Penn State was saving their offensive firepower for that game. And we got to it and it was like, that's it. That was what we were waiting for.
Yeah, that was
so it blows my, yeah. And Michigan's more talented than Ohio State. Without Marvin Harrison Jr., it's really not even close. But Michigan has the better run game. They have a better quarterback. They're deeper on the defensive line. Michigan is going to rush 7 guys and circle them in and out. But I like Michigan to win this 28-24. I do. And
there's a big, one thing we haven't mentioned yet, we're trying to stay away from it, but like the wild card of all of this is like the looming potential that like Michigan's head coach is suspended going into this game, which is a very real possibility. Like we give these predictions of like what we think is going to happen on the field and like in a vacuum, like this is a pretty wild setup, like a little bit unprecedented. Like who knows what's going to really happen? But
we don't know if Jim Harbaugh is going to be on that sideline. We don't know if Harbaugh is going to be on the sideline. But let me ask you this, Garrett. Do you think that if you were on Michigan and you were reading all these news in the headlines all these accusations that, oh, Michigan's has done so well. If you're a guy like, we'll say Roman Wilson, if you're a guy like Roman Wilson and you've been on very successful Michigan teams, and now all you're reading is, oh, you've only found these levels of success due to this cheating. Does that light a fire in you, or do you think they're completely kind of blindfolded, tunnel visioned, where they're going to still play the same game?
Oh, I mean, again, these are like 19 to 24-year-olds. Like, it's definitely going to have an impact on them. It really is. Now, like, which direction? I would think that it kind of lights a fire under them, but it's really weird, distracting stuff. I mean, Blake Corum is having to go to the media. There's a report out yesterday that him and Connor Stallions have like an LLC together and like a business. Like, he's having to go ask these questions or answer these questions as like a college junior, and like, hey, why do you have this LLC set up with Connor Stallions? Like, it's just super weird. Like, if the story can't get any weirder. So, like, yeah, I think that they feel like they're backed into a corner a little bit and everyone's out to get them. You know, I don't think it increases doubt and saying like, oh man, like we've only won these games because we've been stealing signals this whole time. I'm pretty sure they're pretty strong in their belief as to what goes on. But, you know, prior to 2021, when Michigan teams got punched in the face, they just fell apart. Right. And so this team hasn't been punched in the face yet this year. Everything's gone according to plan. You know, Mike Tyson says, you know, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face, though. So we'll see what this Michigan team is really made of, you know, when they get hit in the face. I think they're going to get hit in the face. I think there's going to be a turnover. People forget, you know, 3 weeks ago, Penn State turned Ohio State over and had a fumble return for a touchdown. That game was off to the races for Penn State until a holding call. Penn State has the ability to do the same exact thing to Michigan. How do they handle it? How do they potentially handle it if their head coach isn't on the sideline? How do they handle, like you just said, this entire situation? It's not even worth, like, you know, everybody in college football, everybody who has a podcast, everybody who has, you know, a microphone has talked about this, or a pen has written about this. So it's not like really worth it, because I don't think anybody really knows until they freaking kick the ball off at 12 o'clock on Saturday.
Yeah, which I think is a huge advantage for the Nittany Lions. So it's kind of weird the focus of distraction has shifted, because a few years ago, obviously Penn State had the gray cloud over them, and now it's like it's going on in Ann Arbor. But I will say I'm glad the Nittany Lions are home. Looking forward to watching it, and we'll see if Penn State can shock the world. But Garrett, I appreciate your time as always.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much, my man. Everyone have a great weekend. Really appreciate your guys' support, and take care. Thank you.